All right. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not much of a speaker. It's easy for me to sit at a computer and just flow. But this is my first time speaking in front of an audience, and so forgive me if I stumble over my words a little bit or something like that. You know. But
We family.
to help me along, I did write an essay yesterday, and I tailored it. Excuse me. I tailored it specifically towards Barbourville, in a way. But before I get to that, I want to explain how I got started. I've not always been much of a book reader, yet everyone knows me now for books. But around, I would say 2011, I started searching for myself. That's really how it started. I wanted to know more about me, who I was, where I come from. There's an ancestor by the name of John Henry Clark. He states that Black history is a people's memory. It tells you where you come from, tells you where you're going. With this understanding, I embarked on a journey to discover me. So I started doing genealogy. Genealogy led me to learning about neighborhoods in my hometown that I never knew existed. I heard of a place called Cadentown that my father's family comes from. I never heard of this place. So I started doing research and I started learning about more people buried in these places that wasn't my family. And I'm just like, how could I be born here and not know this history? And I just felt like in school, they wasn't teaching us real, true Black history. There's no disrespect whatsoever to Dr. King, Rosa Parks, or anything, but it's just so much more than that. And I remember every year it's the same thing, and it's like, but I'm from right here, and there's so many history makers from right here. Kentucky itself has a rich Black history. There's people that's come from Barbourville that have done and achieved great things. And it's like, how come we don't uplift them and celebrate? These are our cultural ancestors. So I embarked on that journey. I remember I learned about a lady named Amanda Julia Perry. She was a famous composer, and she's from the same neighborhood I grew up in. And I used to say, I don't like classical music, that's white people's stuff. But she did classical music. Had I grew up with that knowledge, maybe I would have appreciated that type of music more. Seeing someone like myself that walked the same streets that I walk. Those people like that were my inspiration. People used to tell me, you should write a book. I'm not writing. That wasn't my thing. I didn't see myself as a writer. I didn't see myself doing any of this, to be honest. It's funny how life works, you know? But, so I decided I wanted to, my first book, I published it in April 2020 during COVID. Actually, some of it I wrote while I was staying down here in Barbourville. I spent about a year here, walking past here every day, having Ellen's dogs bark at me. But I finished it back in Lexington. And I picked 5 Black women, 5 Black men to highlight that were achievers, that I felt were great individuals and did great things, and I wanted people to know about them. I was ashamed that I was born and raised and I didn't know about them. They kind of made me feel a kind of way. So I wrote that book. When I got the book, I was just so happy I had a book, but I noticed typos and everything. It was a mess. But I didn't know how to put a book together. I went on Google how to write a book, and I just followed instructions. And I read it about 2 years ago, and it was so basic. It was like, I read it, it was like John Walker Dog. And it's kind of how it sounded to me. You know? Like, this is lame. So that inspired me to get better, to learn, to find my writing style, because I didn't think it had any, what's the word? It didn't have any character to it. It was just basic, but yet I was still proud that I did it. So in my next book, I was determined I'm going to do something better. My second book, it was called Drapetomania, Kentucky's runaways and rebels.
Wow.
And I chose that because every time you turn on the TV during February, celebrating Black history, it's always the same slave narrative of us being docile and being whipped.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wanted to find stories of people who decided to fight back.
Yes. Amen.
So I researched all over the states, and I did it in two parts. The first part was the runaways. I selected several stories. You had people like Henry Bibb, who escaped from Mason County, Kentucky. He ended up starting a newspaper in Canada. Was a great guy that was on the Underground Railroad and did a lot of work for other escaped slaves. And he founded a town called Sandwich, which is in Ontario, Canada. Guys like him, another one, my favorite, Thornton Blackburn. Thornton Blackburn was he was enslaved in Louisville, Kentucky. He and his wife, Lucy Blackburn, when they found out she was gonna be sold for the South, they decided to run away. So they split and they left and went to Detroit, Michigan. Well, about 2 years later, walking the streets of Michigan, a white guy that noticed him from back in Kentucky stopped him on the street and he had a conversation. Well, he came back to the state, Kentucky, and told his master that he was up there. So they sent everybody up to Detroit, Michigan to get him. And he is responsible for what is known as Detroit's first race riots. But what they did, when they went up there, they arrested him, and the Black community came together, and they came up with a plan to help him get free. So they had a few women go to visit him in his jail cell, and what they did was they switched out clothes. And they came out running, crying like this. Unbeknownst, one of the women switched clothes with him.
Oh, wow.
So he got out free.
So he
There were several other Black women outside the jail. They tore the patrollers' vehicles up so that they couldn't chase them. And he was able to escape and get away, and he started a successful cab company in Canada. So you have people like that, and then you have the other stories. I don't want to ruin the church, so I don't want to get too gory, but I like hearing people fight back.
Absolute.
Now my third,
Power to the people. Power to the people.
my third book is called Progress to Some, Devastation to Others.
What?
It's 18 chapters, and I wrote about all of the Black communities in Lexington, Kentucky, where I'm from. Because some of those communities do not exist anymore. History lost. You have places like Adamstown, which is, I don't know if y'all familiar with Lexington, but where Memorial Coliseum is, where UK used to play, that was a community called Adamstown.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of filthy, dirty things to take those people's land.
Yep. Yep.
I detailed that. And you had places like Chicago Bottoms, which was the Clark Street area. I know y'all familiar.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That's
St.
close
James
to.
Place.
Yep.
That
Yep.
was called Chicago Bottoms. You had places like Branch Alley, which is in the middle of downtown. There were so many places in Lexington that Black African Americans controlled, owned property. They were a thriving people. This is detailed in my book. Many of my family members on both sides lived in these communities, so it was semi-biographical as I shared some of their stories, what I've uncovered doing my genealogy research, giving life to them. A lot of this got started. I met a lady. She's the foremost figure in Black history in Lexington. Her name is Yvonne Giles. Yvonne Giles. I went to the African cemetery one day, and I used to walk past this place as a kid, and I was terrified. I didn't like it. And that's where I find myself. I went there yesterday to get inspiration to come here. I spent a lot of time. I spent time in the Rosenwald Cemetery here. But I met her there, and I was looking at the headstones, looking for my grandmother's parents who were buried there. Unfortunately, they're in unmarked graves. But she saw me, and she asked me what I was doing, and I explained to her that I was looking for my ancestors. So I gave them their names, and she knew off the top of her head. I'm not familiar with them. Come to find out later, she had written a book about the cemetery, but I didn't know that at the time. So she knew that they wasn't there. But we had a talk for about an hour, and she told me she was so happy to see a young man here doing this, and that a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, all of the people doing this work are elders. They're gonna be gone soon. Some new blood is needed.
Amen.
If nobody else is gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. The late great Toni Morrison once said, if there's a book that you want to read and it's not been written, then you must write it. So I'm gonna
Amen.
Amen.
Currently, I'm writing a biography about a man named R.C.O. Benson. He is probably my favorite person in history. Some of the things that he achieved, I wrote about in here, so I'll get to it when I get to this essay. But I want to thank y'all for allowing me to speak. I'm still a little, as y'all can probably tell.
You're fine. You're fine.
But I'm working through it. But if y'all wouldn't mind, could I have about 10 minutes of your time to give me this essay?
Amen.
I titled this, Black History is Bigger Than One Man's Dream. And just so y'all know, I have a plan to publish this as a pamphlet, but y'all get to hear it first.
Amen.
The issue I have with Black history is what appears. Can I take this off?
Yes.
The issue I have with Black
Is it
history
on?
is what appears to be the selective nature of the country's focus when sharing.
I don't think it's on, baby.
Tell I'm not used to this.
I'm so sorry. It's my fault.
The issue I have with Black history is what appears to be the selective nature of the country's focus when sharing Black history. Many individuals are selected, celebrated, and discussed, while other great Black men and women are allowed to fade into obscurity. America tends to highlight only a few individuals during Black history, and it is those in power who determine who the champions of our race are. Year after year during Black History Month, the same names are mentioned over and over again. Take a moment to reflect on your own education. Who were the most prominently discussed figures in February?
Rosa
Yeah.
Parks, Thurgood Marshall.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that it was one, if not all, of these three individuals. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Frederick Douglass. Perhaps Douglass could be substituted with Harriet Tubman or Thurgood Marshall, but the point remains. Personally, I believe that this does a disservice to our cultural ancestors. Many Black men and women created Black history and deserve recognition for their remarkable achievements. Our people need to do a better job of uncovering these untold stories and sharing them ourselves, archiving the work of our cultural ancestors, more than just a handful of names. Excuse me, I'm out of breath.
Take your time. Take your time. Take your time.
Some countless great Black men and women remain relatively unknown, but why is this the case? How is it that so many people who have accomplished great things go unnoticed while other achievers who may have done the same or even less become the face of Black history? For instance,
I know.
Claudette Colvin's actions were overshadowed by Rosa Parks, even though they both refused to give up their seats to white bus riders in Montgomery, Alabama, which sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. Colvin's incident occurred 9 months before Parks, but the NAACP chose not to publicize Colvin's story because she was a pregnant, unwed minor at the time, and they believed that this information would not be well received by the media. They feared the media would exploit these facts to discredit Colvin's cause, yet in contrast, Rosa Parks was married and belonged to the middle class. We must also acknowledge that colorism likely played a significant role in their preference for Parks being the face of the movement. Her lighter complexion made her more acceptable to the predominantly white audiences whom they were courting sympathy from for their cause. The point is that history is history, facts are facts, just as injustice is injustice.
Absolutely.
Our story must be known regardless of politics. I believe that the larger perspective was missed at the time, which is that future generations of Black children will be unaware of important historical information, which is just as unjust as the crimes committed against our race during the Jim Crow era. Colvin discussed the inaccuracies in the history of the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 when she stated, "Young people think Rosa Parks just sat down on a bus and ended segregation, but that wasn't the case at all."
It's under.
Ah, my bad.
Excuse me one moment.
Take your time. Relax.
Wonderful, I'm telling
Appreciate
you.
y'all. Thank y'all.
Just don't act like your mama.
Yeah.
Just don't act like your mama.
I said yeah.
Say no.
Until recently, Coben's story and involvement in the Browder versus Gale Supreme Court case was not widely known or taught. This case, which declared segregation on buses unconstitutional, led to the end of the Montgomery boycott, and Rosa Parks became the prominent face of the movement. The plaintiffs in the case were these 5 black women: Claudette Colvin, Mary Louise Smith, Aurelia Browder, Susie McDonald, and Janetta Reese, who remain relatively unknown to the average person in America. I done gained some weight, I'm adjusting to my size now, so.
We know.
Rosa Parks was not among them at all. This fact highlights the selective nature of black history taught to the general public and the control exercised by those in power over what information in history is spread and accepted as the facts. Colvin herself acknowledged this when she stated, "I don't think there's room for many more icons. I think that history only has room enough for certain, how many icons can you choose?" I beg to differ.
Me too.
While Dr. Martin Luther King was a great man and deserves all the love, adoration, and respect he received, he is not the only man with a dream. I do not place more importance on his dream than I do the next. But what are we teaching our children when the only thing they hear every year is the same dream speech and the same Rosa Parks story, the latter being historically inaccurate? Why not offer balance? Our children need new heroes to discover, new achievers, new inventors, new black firsts.
Yes.
I promise you, our history is so extensive that there is something or someone new to learn about every day.
Yes.
Amen.
We also have to do a better job at telling these stories in the other 11 months. Our blackness and cultural pride cannot be condensed into 28 days.
Amen.
In my opinion, Black History Month is for white people, no offense, to learn a little bit more about us.
That's my
But it
fun.
seems they are only interested in Dr. King's dream, the Rosa Parks story, and 1 or 2 more, and we follow their directive and do the same, highlighting the few people they highlight. In regards to the late, great Dr. King, how can you never hear them discuss statements he made like, "We've got to strengthen black institutions. I call upon you to take your money out of the banks downtown and deposit your money in Tri-State Bank." The Tri-State Bank is black owned in Memphis, Tennessee, and has existed since 1946.
Wow.
Many black children today are not even aware that we had and still have banks that we own and control. Our bank was a black owned bank called Greenwood. Dr. King called for us to support our businesses, and I make sure I do this very thing personally. I do. This fact is rarely spoken of when we talk of Dr. King. The only talking points widely accepted are nonviolence and integration. But he was multifaceted, and I believe that it is disrespectful to his legacy to limit him in that way.
What you said.
It diminishes his overall message, which included black love and black unity.
Amen.
And before I change the topic, allow me to make a statement regarding his murder. We all are aware that he was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. But what many people do not realize is the United States government had some involvement in his murder.
Absolute. What
In
you
a civil
said.
suit that took place on December 8th, 1999, a Memphis jury found the United States government guilty of a conspiracy to assassinate Dr.
Mercy.
King. They gave us a holiday in his name, but to me, this is what I consider tokenism and an attempt at pacification. Nothing more. I encourage everyone here today to get and read a book called Code Name Zorro by Mark Lane and the late Dick Gregory. They uncovered a hidden conspiracy to kill Dr. King that goes back to the head of the FBI at the time, J. Edgar Hoover.
Mm-hmm.
He was determined to discredit and destroy Dr. King. He wanted, in his own words, to suppress the rise of a black messiah. King at the time was at the forefront of the civil rights movement, which is the reason he was targeted in many heinous and covert ways. Study these facts as well, not just his dream speech. Now, I want to ask a question, if I may. Does anyone here know who the first black lawyer in the United States was? Y'all should know.
Who
We
was
was talking about this.
Azar.
That's Amari.
I mean, the mom. They twins.
Yeah, they twins.
What'd you say?
They're not answering.
He failed. Are you aware that there were black lawyers in the country before the abolition of slavery in 1865?
Yes.
The first is believed to be Macon Bowling Allen, who practiced law in Maine in the 1840s. I should have been specific, 1844. But it is actually a man named Moses Simons. He practiced law in the criminal courts of New York City all the way back in 1816. His
Mercy.
career in law ended 4 years later after he was discriminated against at a party on account of his race. He got into a fight with a white man and this tarnished his reputation. These are things not taught in school. Robert Morris was another. He was the first black man to win a jury trial in 1847. And all of this is during the era of slavery. Now, considering we are in Kentucky, would anybody know who the first black lawyer in this state is?
Jones.
No. Good guess, though. Oh. Nathaniel Harper was the first black lawyer in this state, gaining admission to the Kentucky bar in Louisville, 1871. His law studies go back 11 years to 1860, so he was studying while we were still enslaved, and consider that Kentucky was a slave state. Not only that, he was also the first black judge in the state. He even established a law school for black students that was very successful. Harper's Law School existed from 1874 until 1890 when it merged with Central Law School in Louisville. That's a part of Simmons College, if y'all are familiar with that. Yes. In 1890, this school was only one of 4 law schools in the country for black students. Although Harper is officially the first black lawyer in this state, I would be doing you a disservice if I failed to include this little known story about the unnamed yellow man who was enslaved and simultaneously was a practicing lawyer. Something completely unheard of. He was sold on a Louisville auction block in 1849, and the advertisement read, Negro lawyer at auction. Although he was unable to practice in the Court of Appeals, he was reportedly unbeatable in common law cases. The auction must have attracted quite a crowd who eagerly gathered to catch a glimpse of the enslaved lawyer. Throughout history, white folks have always regarded us with a curious fascination as if we were peculiar beings whenever we ventured beyond the realm of simple tasks such as hammering a nail or cooking. Even I, as the author of these words, found myself in utter astonishment upon learning about this extraordinary tale. It is not that we lack the intellectual capacity to achieve such feats, rather we were systematically denied opportunities.
What you said.
Our knowledge of slavery has only depicted us as unintelligent beings suited solely for physical labor and entertainment. When we stumble across stories like this one, it surpasses the usual and becomes a cause for shock and awe, even within our own community. Now,
How you? That's my phone. That's all right. Take a breath and slow it down. Take your time. Take your time.
You're doing wonderful.
Yes. Yes.
I appreciate it. Now the reason I got on the topic of black lawyers is because I wanted to segue into some local history and history makers right here and from Barbourville. Charles Wesley Jones was a black lawyer born in Barbourville, Kentucky in 1899. Later in life, he moved to Detroit, Michigan and became a judge. This made him the first black judge in Michigan's history.
Hello.
Is that our uncle? Okay.
And he was from right here. He passed away from injuries sustained in a traffic accident in 1957. This is one of your own. Study him. There's more to his story, so I implore you to learn of it. His family may still be here.
Yes.
Some of you could be his relatives.
Yes.
He made history. He's not the only black judge to come from Barbourville, however. There is one in more recent history by the name of Morris Edward Cole. He was born here in 1933 and became the first black judge in Denver, Colorado. He and his partner Billy Lewis opened the first black law firm in that city. And he retired as a judge. He became a law teacher at Metropolitan State University in Colorado. But he came from right here. Both of these gentlemen made black history. There are many more that could be discussed and many more from here who may be forgotten and are waiting to be discovered. Discover them, teach about them, uplift them as your local heroes. Before I end this, let me state this. Heroism goes beyond our idea of saving someone. A hero is anyone, a young person, or any person for that matter, can look up to, learn from, become inspired by, and emulate. They are plentiful. Yes, Dr. King is a hero. Yes, Rosa Parks is a hero. But so is Elizabeth Jennings, who preceded Rosa Ann Claudette Colvin when she refused to give up her seat on a New York City street train in 1854. Learn this story. Henry Highland Garnett was a minister and militant abolitionist, another great man worth studying. I lost where I was. He inspired the man I'm currently writing a biography about. This man's name is R.C.O. Benjamin. He was killed in Lexington on October 2nd, 1900, for coming to the aid of several black men who were attempting to register to vote. He got into an argument with a white challenger at the precinct who had a history of violence towards black women and men. He was really a menace. I've looked into him. He shot Benjamin in the back, killing him instantly. Benjamin was a great man, a man who wore many hats, a very brave man, brave and bold black man. He was a Baptist preacher. At one time, he was temporary pastor at Pleasant Green Baptist Church in Lexington, around 1898. He was the author of over 10 books and pamphlets. In the 1890s, he had more books than any other black author in American history. Wow. I have all of them but one. Wow. He was a lawyer, the first black lawyer in the state of California, passing the bar in Los Angeles in 1888. As big as that state is, he was the first for several years. He practiced law in 12 states, including Kentucky. He practiced here he practiced in Lexington, Georgetown, Nicholasville, and Winchester.
Wow.
He was a newspaper owner and editor. Several of the papers that he owned included the Negro American, which he started in 1886 in Birmingham, Alabama, as well as the Lexington Standard, which was known as the greatest black newspaper of the time. That was from 1896 to 1900 when he was killed. In fact, he was a newspaper owner and editor, as well as a poet and orator. He has a book of poetry that he released in 1883 called Poetic Gems. I also possess this book.
Wow.
In fact, I visited his gravesite yesterday to get the inspiration to come here and speak to you. This great man is largely obscure. I believe that he was waiting for me to come along and tell the story. A friend of his, Monroe Majors, wrote weeks after the death of his friend, R.C.O. Benjamin, who was in all things manly and courageous and fought to his dying hour a hero's fight for race manhood and race respect. The race owes a debt of gratitude to Mr. Benjamin, whose romantic life will someday inspire the black historian to write him among the great men of the century. 124 years later, I am the black historian who is writing Benjamin among the great men of the century.
Yes.
I have dedicated my life to discovering black people from the past who are unknown, such as this great man, and bringing attention to them. That's my motivation. They inspire me. Maybe they can inspire you. Amen. Black history is you. Black history makers are in this room and will come from you. Your dream is valid too. Black history is bigger than one man's dream.
Yes.
Black history.
Aww, I'm so proud.
Yes. I can't stand up. I got my hands full.
I want to thank y'all. This was, I got a little.
You did great. You did great. Yes.
You know, when I got the call, I was actually in Boston, Massachusetts. I wanted to do some the man that I'm writing about lived in Boston as well, so I'm just following his trail. Sometimes you gotta put down the book, get off the computer, and go where they were.
That's right. That's
So
right.
I decided to do that. And I got the call from my auntie while I was walking around the cemetery up there. And I immediately said yes, because I had opportunities in the past, but my shyness took over, and I declined it. The Kentucky Historical Society reached out to me in 2020 and asked me to be a part of a project. And I was like, who are these people? They calling me, how do they know me? So I didn't even respond. I was actually living here at the time, but I didn't even give them a response. But I keep that message as a reminder. And I told myself about a week before I got the call, the next opportunity I get to speak, I don't care how nervous I am, I'm going to do it. Go ahead. A week later, she comes. Okay. I know that's from above, you know.
Amen.
Here I am. I don't know what else to say. But
Good job. Good job. Good job. Yes. Thank you.
Before you sit down, I just want to tell you that you're a winner in my book. Amen. You're a young man. You are researching, doing things that most people don't have time to do.
Exactly.
So, in my appreciation to you, I've got you a gold medal.
Aww. Aww. We're videoing. Aw, good job. Rico, we're not done, baby.
I don't know if you know me or not. But I'm family.
Yeah. Reverend cousin. Reverend cousin.
Reverend cousin,
She was
brother.
going to the hospital to have surgery. And they was going to leave at what time?
We was
3:30.
about Yeah, in the morning.
3:30 in the morning. So I got up early that morning and I met her in the street. She was getting ready to get in the car.
I was getting ready to get you because I didn't know who you was. I'll be honest about it.
Them to Lexington.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I appreciate that.
But anyway, I just want to present this to my cousin.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And young man, God's going to use you all over the world.
Amen.
I don't
And I just want y'all to know I'm going to do more
believe
for Barbourville because my roots are here. I'm not from here, but I spent my summers down here until she made me mad and I went back home.
I know. Look, kill my vacation.
A nice picture with you. So everybody, if you want to stand up here.